Hi, it's Rachel with Stirring the Deep. Today, you have the choice of abiding in death or abiding in life. And I'm going to dive into this, in this video. And when you first look in the beginning, in Genesis, you see life, okay? And some of the things that are symbolic of life, meaning this is before death came into the world, before sin entered in. Okay, so you have this Garden of Eden, and you have these two creations that are intimately known. That's why they're revealed in this word. They're known by God, Adam and Eve. And they are one flesh. There is a unity there that is so connected between them. And you also see them walking in the garden with God. There is a very close intimacy with God. And we see that they were walking always in the will of God. They had that unity, okay? And in that, that's one aspect of life that you see there, okay? And I'm going to dive into these a little bit. The other is in Genesis 1:29 through 30, and God said, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every green tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food," and it was so. Every creature, because there was life here, were eating herbs, fruits of trees, okay? These are the elements of life. The food you take in, all that you take is of life, okay? And the food is a huge analogy in the Bible to not only, it talks about actual food, and in that it teaches us what we're taking in also of this world. So here, everything that they were taking in, everything was of life. But after they fell, that started to change. So after that fall, so once sin came in, you see that now there is separation not only between them and God, but between each other, Adam and Eve. And you see that in Genesis 3. Okay? And then as you go on, and where you also see too, they were given different tunics of skin. Okay, this is something also they didn't have. It was all a different reflection of death. Their garments were of death. Okay? Because that's where sin leads you. And so now you have this death that's in the world. So, and not too short a time, in chapter 6 in Genesis, you have let me see. No, I'm going to read in chapter 9. And this is what's interesting, because this is even after with Noah, and the flood had just occurred, right? Cleansing the earth in a sense. But now this is how things were going to be started. Before, everything was started in life, and you see how it all fell. Now we're going into this different phase, right? And here he says to Noah in verse 3, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs." And then it talks about the flesh, right? And partaking of that. This was now man was living, and this was not redemption, okay? Because Noah, he was going to die. So there was no salvation. So even though the earth was cleansed, they were still in that death state. Okay, and that's why you see soon his sons, Ham, who soon fell. But here, now God is giving them food, the animals. and in them is death, okay, because they have to die in order for you to partake, right? So now this is all about death now. And my point in all this is that you see these reflections, okay, in the scriptures and in our world of we're partaking of death now, and we live in that existence, and taking in that the dead carcasses is a representation of that we dwell in death. This is the pit, okay, and it all comes and starts from where our minds are, because you see that's where that's where sin generates, that's where rebellion against God generates. It's from that mind that's governed by a corrupted fallen spirit, that's under the sway of the evil one. Okay, that's under the sway of the lying spirit, of not walking in union with God. So in the beginning you had life, now you had this period of death. Now what's interesting is when Jesus came, okay, he started to move us and show that the kingdom of heaven, right, that he was going to bring in would be of back to like the Garden of Eden, because that's what it means. You're now dwelling within the presence of God again. That means there is unity between you and him and you and others. Okay, that means that there is unity between you and all of creation, right? And that's where the lamb and the wolf lay down together. It's like they, the animals eat straw. They don't eat each other anymore. We don't eat the dead carcass anymore because we're not taking in death anymore. That time period is finished. And now you're moving into life. And this is what Jesus brought. He brought that ability for us to partake of life and go back into the Garden of Eden. And another very significant part of this is that this is why when he talked about lust, right? In the littlest way, if you have lust, he says, that's breaking the law. And one of the reasons, and because lust is a part of death, and he was saying when he was bringing in the kingdom, he was laying out what it's like in the kingdom. That's why he's like, love your enemies. It's no longer you destroy your enemies, you love your enemies. You no longer partake of death, you're partaking of life. Now he still ate like fish, and I want to talk about that in a minute, because he had to go and taste death for all of us. That is what he's done. So meaning what he did is he came to give us his spirit to redeem us and resurrect us. And that means he comes and fills us with his spirit, with his wisdom. He is the word of God. The truth is the words that are spirit and they are life. That voice is so powerful of God. And let me just read from you in Psalm 20, let's see. 29, where it talks about the voice of the Lord. It says in verse 4, the voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. Yes, the Lord splinters the cedars of Lebanon. He makes them also skip like a calf. Lebanon and Sirion like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord divides the flames of fire. And it goes on. Is that voice, is that directing you, is that pure conscience of wisdom, of life, the truth that now governs you, that brings you into life. It's so powerful. So that's what Christ came to do. That's what Jesus came to give us, is that ability to live in that life. But when he died, okay, in that physical flesh, that was just a representation of what's happening in the spirit. And his flesh body raised, but that was very, very important, because you had to see that he totally overcame death in this creation, okay? But his journey was that he would taste death for everyone, because what happens is he begins to knit to your spirit. He's actually going with you through death to bring you to life. So he's tasting death in everyone, okay? And so that is what his spirit is doing. And that's how we come to life, is that he actually, when we have that communion with him, he comes along, and by his words and his truth and his wisdom and that love, that spirit, he actually brings us into life. So he's in our death with us, crucified with Christ. I mean, we're going through this together. And so even after he resurrected, he still ate that fish, right? And he ate honey. He ate the fish because he was saying, I still am on this journey of tasting death for everyone. But the honey was that it was going to have a sweet end. Okay, that's one part of that verse. But this is so important to remember because that is why he ate death still, right? Because he was saying that was part of what he came to do. But when you look at all the other things that he was bringing in of life, he was talking about being one flesh, man and woman. When they were asking him about divorce, and he said, you know what? This is how it's supposed to be. Because they asked, well, Moses gave us this. Remember the law, the death allowed divorce. It allowed separation because people were full of death. So actually that unity really couldn't be reconciled until the end, until they're resurrected in life. Death is totally overcome. And so that's why he said that from the beginning, this is not how it was meant to be, that you would divorce, because you were one flesh. You were in that perfect unity of love. And if you're in that unity, you don't separate. You just grow closer and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's what he was talking about. Okay? And it talks about this in Matthew 19. Because they were talking about, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? Okay? And he answered and said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? He's taking you back to the beginning. He's the beginning and the end. This is what he came to do. This is his journey. He's been working it out. Okay? It's all part of the plan. And said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. And what did he join together initially? Adam and Eve. They had that perfect union in the beginning. And so if that is what he has done, he is going to bring that back into reconciliation. So a lot of people don't underestimate the significance of Adam and Eve. And maybe I'll go more into that in another video. But that's where you also read about this one flesh is them. Okay? And that is that pure bond of love because you're of the same spirit. Because that's what you find is you start to become of the Spirit of God. And because that's his spirit in you, then other people that also have that spirit, you're going to feel a very strong connection with because you have the same spirit. You see that in them. Okay? But this oneness is going back to the beginning. That's what he came to do. So that's why he talks about, the lust of the eyes, right? And he says here in Matthew 5:27, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And then he said, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. This is saying, okay, so he's saying, okay, now you can even lust in your heart. And how, because that's a part of death. Death has, the nature of death, what keeps you tied to death, okay, and that is, ultimately it's sin, right? Because the wages of sin is death. So what keeps you to that sin, the result of sin is that. But what keeps you tied to death is lust. Lust is a very controlling, compelling, consuming thing that just overtakes you. Okay? But it's of death. It's tied to death. And the flip side of lust, so lust keeps you tied to death. That it's full of lies because it's full of that lying spirit. But when you really believe those lies, that lust, that's what's created because you're believing it, okay? And that's keeping you so tied to the things of death. And the flip side of lust is cruelty. Because when you're abiding in that lust, you're being extremely cruel. That's the result. That's because it's death that you're actually engaging in and just manifesting and feeding. And you see this so much. Like I've mentioned these examples, like people and media and this world creates this lust to partake of animals and the flesh of animals. And, you know, with the juicy steaks and the hamburgers and all these things that they think that they're training you, this is what you want, this is what you desire, so you lust after those things. But the flip side is cruelty. Animals are tortured daily for that. This earth is the pit. This is a picture of hell, where you have people feasting at the torment of other people. It's a horrific thing. This is the pit. But now is the time when we're supposed to be coming out of this and going back to the beginning, because that's what Jesus came to do, to be the beginning and the end. That's what it says in Revelation. And so that means you're going back to the beginning. And that's why it says those verses in Isaiah about the wolf and the lamb lying down together. It's talking about this peace. It's talking about going back to the beginning. And that's what Jesus was saying here with the lust. Lust is a result of death. It's a lust for death, ultimately. But it's covered in all these images that make it look beautiful, okay, and desirable. But what it's covering and what it's really doing is creating more death in your life. So in these days, you've got to start leaving everything of death, because that's where the pit has a hold on you, is ultimately in your mind, and it holds you by your lusts. But it's always going to have cruelty as the other side. And you see that even like with women and men, you know, the way they treat each other. And when they're in that lust state, and that's what they're feeding, you know, the women are just making huge sacrifices and doing so many things to be that lust image. And men are just desiring, hungering for that lust image. And all of it, if you pull back the blinders, what do you see? Cruelty to their souls and to their spirits and to people around them. Okay? At whatever level, it's all full of death. That's why he's saying, you know what? You can't even do it. The law said don't commit adultery, because when the law was given, they were in death. But now he's saying, you know what? You're going to be moving into life, and you don't have anything else to do with that. And that's why he's also talking about becoming one flesh. Because now, when you don't have lust in your heart, so you're not trying to create it, or you're not trying to feast upon it, then you can have a true bond with someone else and truly be that one flesh. Okay? So he is taking us back to the beginning. And that's why these different things in our life are very important to address, from, you know, just the different sides of all that entail death and all that entail life. And I'll dive into that in the next video. Till next time, keep stirring the deep. It's the one thing that changes everything else.